This story is titled, Canceled the Wedding, when my fiancée secretly invited the person who ruined my career. Now she is begging. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. I'm Brian, 31 years old, and 6 months ago, I got engaged to my girlfriend, Lily. We'd been together for 5 years, and I thought we were starting the happiest chapter of our lives. The wedding was planned for next month, but recent events have made me realize just how wrong I was about everything. To understand how it got to this point, you need some context. I have a younger sister, Sarah. She's 28. I haven't spoken to her in over 9 years, and there are good reasons for that. Growing up, Sarah and I just couldn't get along. Our parents tried to force us into some ideal sibling relationship, but all we ever did was clash. Sarah was relentlessly competitive, constantly trying to outdo me in every possible way. I still remember the moment that set the tone for everything. I was 10 and Sarah was 7. I had just won a spelling bee at school, and our parents took us out for ice cream to celebrate. Instead of being happy for me, Sarah had a full-blown meltdown right there in the ice cream shop. She screamed that it wasn't fair and that she could spell better than I could. She demanded that our parents quiz her right then and there, making the entire situation painfully awkward and humiliating. That was just the beginning. As we grew older, her behavior became more insidious. If I got an A on a test, she'd obsessively study until she got an A too. When I was 12, I won a local art competition, and our parents took us out for dinner to celebrate. Instead of being happy for me, Sarah threw a tantrum in the restaurant, screaming that she could draw better. She demanded to show everyone her sketches right then and there, turning what should have been a joyful moment into a scene. That's just one example. This behavior defined our childhood. If I joined the basketball team, suddenly she was all about basketball. When I showed an interest in a girl during high school, Sarah would go out of her way to become her best friend or casually flirt with her. It was maddening. My home, which should have been my sanctuary, felt more like a constant competition. Our parents tried everything to help us find common ground. They even enrolled us in family therapy when I was 16 and Sarah was 13, but she refused to engage. She'd sit there, arms crossed, barely saying a word while the therapist tried unsuccessfully to draw her out. Eventually, the therapist told my parents that unless Sarah was willing to cooperate, there wasn't much else they could do. Things escalated to a breaking point when we were both in our early 20s. I had just graduated college and landed my dream job at a prestigious marketing firm. It was the kind of position I had worked tirelessly for. Great pay, fantastic benefits, and the chance to work on campaigns that could shape the industry. I felt like my years of hard work had finally paid off. Meanwhile, Sarah was still in college, floundering to find her footing. She had changed majors at least 4 times and was on the brink of academic probation, struggling to keep up with deadlines and direction. When I shared the news of my job offer at a family dinner, I expected at least a polite congratulation. Instead, Sarah erupted. Her face twisted with rage, and she started yelling at me, accusing me of being a show-off and always stealing the spotlight. "Why do you always have to be the golden child?" she spat. "Why can't you ever just fail for once so someone else can have a chance?" The words stung, but what really shook me was the look in her eyes, a toxic blend of anger, envy, and bitterness. My parents tried to step in, reassuring her that she had plenty of time to figure things out and that my success didn't diminish her own potential. But Sarah wasn't having it. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard that a picture fell off the wall. Later that night, I overheard her talking to one of her friends on the phone. She was saying things like, "He's not going to keep rubbing this in my face, and I'll make sure he's knocked down a peg or two." I brushed it off as her usual dramatic venting. After all, we'd had our share of sibling spats over the years, and I thought this was just another one of her tantrums. But I couldn't have been more wrong. A few days before I was set to start my new job, I received an email from the HR department at the firm. They had conducted a sudden review of my background based on some disturbing materials that had come to their attention. Apparently, someone had sent them forged emails and screenshots from fake social media accounts, all under my name. These documents contained hateful and discriminatory language, painting me as someone completely unfit for the role. I was stunned and devastated when HR informed me that they were rescinding my offer. The job I had worked so hard to secure was gone in an instant. It didn't take long for me to put the pieces together. Sarah was the only person who knew enough about me to fabricate such personal, damaging content. When I confronted her, she played innocent at first, shrugging off my accusations with an icy smile. But when I pressed harder, her facade cracked. "Maybe you deserve to know what it feels like for once," she finally said, her voice trembling with anger. "You've always been the favorite, the one everyone admires. It's about time you got a taste of failure." Her words left me speechless. My own sister had deliberately sabotaged my future out of jealousy and spite. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a declaration of war. But then she broke down and admitted everything. She'd made the fake accounts, forged the emails, and destroyed my reputation. All because she wanted me to fail at something. There was a twisted pride in her voice, as if she'd finally won some warped competition. I was crushed. This was beyond sibling rivalry. This was a deliberate act of sabotage by my own flesh and blood. I told her I never wanted to see or speak to her again, and walked out of the house that day. I crashed on a friend's couch while I tried to figure out how to pick up the pieces of my life. In the years that followed, I cut all contact with Sarah. My parents still saw her occasionally, but they knew better than to bring her up around me. Rebuilding my career was an uphill battle. I had to start with a lower-paying job and claw my way back up, but I eventually made it. Now I have a great job, supportive friends, and, until recently, I had Lily. When I met Lily 5 years ago, it felt like everything was finally falling into place. She was kind, funny, and understanding. On our 4th date, I told her everything about Sarah. She listened and sympathized, saying that family relationships could be complicated and that she respected my decision to cut ties. I made one thing crystal clear. Sarah was not to be a part of my life, especially not at my wedding date. At first, Lily seemed to understand, but as we got deeper into planning the wedding, things started to shift. She kept bringing up Sarah, suggesting that maybe it was time to forgive and forget. Every time I shut her down, the thought of seeing Sarah again made my stomach turn. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and having Sarah there would turn it into a nightmare. "Dad," Lily would drop the subject for a while, but I could tell she wasn't happy. It all came to a head last week when we were finalizing the guest list. Lily brought up Sarah again, and this time she refused to back down. I remember the exact moment things unraveled. We were sitting in the living room, the guest list spread out on the coffee table between us. I was already exhausted from a long day at work, and the last thing I wanted was to rehash the same argument we'd been circling for weeks. But Lily was determined. "Brian, I really think you should reconsider inviting Sarah," she said, her voice soft, as if she were trying to ease me into it. "She's your sister. Don't you think it's time to forgive and move on?" I clenched my jaw. This wasn't the first time she'd said those words, but for some reason, they hit me harder this time. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, her eyes full of hope and concern. Or maybe it was the weariness I felt from constantly shutting her down. Either way, the words landed differently that night. "Lily, we've talked about this. It's not happening. Having her there will ruin everything. You know what she did to me?" Lily sighed, her frustration barely hidden. She said, "But it was years ago. People change. Maybe she's different now. Maybe she regrets it." I felt the familiar anger bubbling up. Regrets it? She destroyed my childhood, my career, my reputation. She knew exactly what she was doing. How do you just regret something like that? Her eyes searched mine, looking for some flicker of compromise. I'm not saying what she did was okay. I just think maybe she deserves a chance to make it right. I stared at her in disbelief. "Why are you pushing this? Why does she deserve a chance to be at our wedding?" Lily's face hardened. "Because family is important, Brian. I can't imagine cutting someone off forever." The words stung more than they should have. Family. You think this is about some petty grudge? She didn't steal my toys or read my diary. She sabotaged my entire life. I had to rebuild everything from scratch because of her. She shook her head, her voice growing sharper. "You're being stubborn. You're punishing her for a mistake she made when she was young. That did it." I snapped. "A mistake. Do you know how humiliating it was to lose that job? To have my name dragged through the mud because my sister couldn't stand that I was doing well? That's not a mistake. Lily, that's cruelty." She crossed her arms and looked away. Maybe she's grown. Maybe she wants to apologize. And maybe I don't care, I shot back. She made her choices, and I made mine. I told you this was a boundary for me. If you can't respect that, then maybe we shouldn't be getting married. Lily's eyes widened in shock. I could see the hurt spread across her face like a shadow. "You're seriously saying that over this?" she said. And I replied, "Yes, because it's not just this. It's about trust. You're supposed to be on my side, Lily. You knew how much this meant to me, and you're still trying to push me." We sat there in silence, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I could feel my heart pounding every beat, a painful reminder of how far we'd fallen from the happy couple we were just months ago. Lily whispered, "I thought you'd understand. I thought love meant forgiveness." I shook my head. my voice barely audible. Love also means respect, and I can't respect someone who won't respect my boundaries. She didn't say anything after that. She just sat there, her eyes glossy with unshared tears. After what felt like an eternity, she stood up and walked out of the room. I sat there alone, staring at the guest list, the names blurring together as my vision grew. Misty. The next day, things were tense. Lily barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was with clipped, polite sentences. I couldn't stand it. This cold, distant version of her was worse than any shouting match. It felt like a wall had gone up between us, and neither of us knew how to tear it down. I kept telling myself it would blow over. We loved each other. We'd been through so much together. Surely this was just a rough patch, but deep down, I knew something had shifted. Trust had been cracked, and once that happens, it's hard to glue the pieces back together. A week later, everything exploded. I was coming home late from work, exhausted and drained. I walked through the door and immediately noticed Lily sitting at the dining table. Her face was pale, her hands trembling, and the tension in the air was suffocating. Something was wrong. "What's going on?" I asked cautiously. She took a shaky breath and looked up at me, guilt etched across her face. "Brian, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice trembling. My stomach tightened as a sinking feeling began to spread through me. "What is this about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I reached out to Sarah," she said, so quietly it was almost a whisper. For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard her right. "You what?" The words came out louder than I intended. "I found her on social media a few months ago," she continued, tears welling in her eyes. "I've been talking to her. I just wanted to understand what happened between you two. And I invited her to the wedding." It felt like the ground vanished beneath my feet. I couldn't breathe. My head buzzed with a dull, deafening roar. "You invited her?" My voice was barely controlled, trembling with disbelief. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought if she came, maybe you two could finally—" "No," I cut her off, my voice sharp and shaking with anger. "You went behind my back. You did exactly what I told you not to do. You betrayed me." "Brian, please," she pleaded, her tears falling freely now. "I love you. I was just trying to help." "Help?" I let out a bitter laugh, the sound hollow and cold. "You think this is helping? You knew how I felt, and you did it anyway. This isn't love, Lily. This is manipulation." She reached for me, but I stepped back, my heart fracturing into jagged, painful pieces. "Brian, wait," she said, her voice cracking. "There's more." I thought she'd changed. I really did. But when I spoke to her, I realized I was wrong. She said— Lily hesitated, as if the words themselves hurt to repeat. She said, "Oh, you're his new girl? How can you even be with such a loser?" My chest tightened, and I clenched my fists. Of course Sarah hadn't changed. Of course she'd lash out, even at someone trying to reach out with kindness. Lily continued, tears streaming down her face. "That's when I realized. You were right all along. I was so wrong to reach out, Brian. I thought I was helping, but I only made things worse. I see now how much she hurt you. I'm so sorry." Her words hung heavy in the air, but they did nothing to soften the pain or betrayal I felt in that moment. "You should have trusted me," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You should have listened when I told you what I needed." Lily sobbed, her face in her hands, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. My heart felt torn apart, and all I could think about was the one person I'd trusted above all had gone behind my back, thinking she knew better than I did. "If you can't respect me enough to trust my judgment, then we have nothing left," she cried. "Don't say that. We can fix this." I shook my head. The pain was too overwhelming to contain. "No, Lily. You broke my trust, and without trust, there's nothing left to fix." I turned and walked away, each step heavier than the last. The air between us felt final, like a door slamming shut on the life we'd built together. I knew it was over, and it hurt more than I could ever put into words. The silence in our apartment was suffocating. After the fight, I spent the night in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word we'd exchanged. My mind felt like a storm I couldn't escape. Sleep didn't come, only an endless loop of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. In the cold light of morning, the weight of everything settled on my chest. I could hear Lily moving around the muffled sounds of her packing. I didn't need to ask what she was doing. I knew the life we had built over 5 years was coming apart, and again because of Sarah, and neither of us could stop it. When she finally walked out of the room, her suitcase in hand, our eyes met. Her face was streaked with tears, but there was a quiet resolve in her expression. "Are you sure this is what you want, Brian?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard. My throat felt tight. "No, Lily, this isn't what I want." but it's what you've left me with. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I never meant to hurt you. I know, I said, my voice cracking. But that doesn't change what you did. We stood there for a moment, the air between us heavy with everything left unsaid. Then she turned and walked out the door. The sound of it closing behind her was a finality I wasn't ready for. I sank onto the couch, the emptiness of the apartment pressing in on me. It felt like the walls were closing in, the silence deafening in its finality. The next few days were a blur. I called off the wedding, officially canceling the venue, the caterers, and the florist. Each call felt like another stab to the heart, like I was dismantling a dream piece by piece. The reactions were mixed. My friends tried to be supportive, though some of them clearly didn't understand. Lily's family, on the other hand, made no effort to hide their anger. Not her mother called me a heartless monster, accusing me of throwing away a perfect relationship over petty sibling drama. Her brother, who I used to be close with, sent me a long, bitter text telling me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I stared at the screen feeling numb. They didn't know the full story. They didn't understand how deep the hurt went. In the middle of all this, my own family decided to weigh in. My parents called me relentlessly, leaving voicemails that ranged from pleading to guilt-tripping. My mother's voice was shaky and tearful. Brian, please. This could be a chance to heal the family. Don't let this tear everything apart. But it wasn't me who had torn everything apart. It was Sarah, and now Lily. The people who were supposed to protect me and stand by me had crossed lines I couldn't forgive. One evening, after a long day at work, I came home to an email from Sarah. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. The subject line simply said, "I'm sorry." The email was long filled with apologies and explanations. She wrote about how she'd spent years in therapy trying to understand her jealousy and resentment. She admitted that what she did to me was unforgivable, but claimed she was a different person now. She wanted to reconnect, to make amends, to be a sister to me again. I stared at the words on the screen, feeling nothing but exhaustion. Was I supposed to believe that a few years of therapy could erase the pain she'd caused? Could I undo the damage of losing my dream job? The embarrassment? The years of struggle to rebuild my career? The scars ran too deep. I closed the email without responding. I spent the following weekend alone trying to process everything. My mind kept circling back to Lily. I missed her. The way she'd laugh at my dumb jokes. The way her eyes sparkled when she talked about her passions. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the trust we'd had was gone. It wasn't just about Sarah. It was about Lily choosing to ignore something I'd made clear from the start, and to do exactly the opposite to prove a point. I went to play basketball, trying to sweat out the frustration. I lifted until my legs burned, focusing on the physical pain instead of the emotional one. Afterward, I sat in my car, drenched in sweat, staring out the windshield. Was I being too stubborn? Was it worth losing Lily over this? But every time I considered reaching out, I remembered the hurt in my chest when she admitted she'd gone behind my back. The feeling of betrayal. The cold realization that the person I loved hadn't respected my boundaries. No matter how much I loved her, that wound was too fresh, too deep. On Tuesday morning, I walked into work feeling like a ghost. My boss, a no-nonsense woman named Ashley, pulled me aside. She'd always been supportive, and today was no different. "You doing okay?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. I forced a smile. "I'm getting there." She nodded, studying me for a moment. "Sometimes standing your ground is the hardest thing to do, but it's worth it." Her words stuck with me. I spent the rest of the day lost in code, letting the rhythm of work distract me from the chaos in my mind. By the time I got home, the apartment felt emptier than ever. But for the first time in days, I felt a small sense of peace. I had made the right choice. It didn't make the pain any less real, but at least I hadn't compromised myself. That night, I deleted Sarah's email. I didn't need to read it again. I knew my answer. In the days that followed, life moved on, but it felt like I was standing still. The apartment, once filled with warmth and laughter, now felt cold and hollow. Lily's absence was a constant ache. Her side of the closet was empty, the bathroom shelves half bare. I kept catching myself expecting to see her, hearing her voice in the quiet moments, only to be reminded that she was gone. I threw myself into work, using the long hours and challenging projects as a distraction. But no matter how busy I kept myself, the weight of everything lingered. The betrayal, the shattered trust, the future that had slipped through my fingers. All of it followed me like a shadow. Then came the call from my parents. My phone buzzed late one evening, and for a moment I considered ignoring it. But something made me pick up. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "Brian," she said, her tone cautious. "Please come to dinner this weekend. We need to talk." I don't think that's a good idea, I replied, exhaustion seeping into my words. Please, she pleaded. It's important. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Maybe some part of me still hoped they would understand, that they'd finally see my side of things. But deep down, I knew I was setting myself up for disappointment. Saturday evening came, and I drove to my parents' house, my stomach in knots. The memories of my childhood home felt different now, tinged with a sadness I couldn't shake. As I walked up the steps, I took a deep breath, bracing myself. The door opened, and my mom greeted me with a forced smile. "I'm so glad you came," she said softly, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a plea than comfort. I stepped inside and immediately sensed something was off. The air felt heavy, like a storm was about to break. And then I saw her, Sarah, sitting at the dining table. Her eyes met mine, wide with something that almost looked like regret. A cold wave of anger rushed through me. "What is she doing here?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Brian, please," my dad said, his expression pained. "We just want to help you make peace. What is wrong with everyone?" "You did this behind my back," I said, the betrayal hitting me like a punch to the gut. "You ambushed me." My mom's eyes filled with tears. "We thought if you two just talked, you could finally heal." I shook my head, my hands clenched into fists. "You don't get it. You never have." "Brian, wait," Sarah spoke up, her voice trembling. "I just want to apologize." Her words fell on me like empty noise. I turned to my parents, bitterness rising in my throat. "You're still trying to fix something that's broken beyond repair. You can't force this." My dad's voice cracked. "We just want our family back. This is your family now," I said, my voice hard. "Where trust doesn't matter. Where betrayal is swept under the rug." I turned toward the door, the weight of finality heavy on my shoulders. "I told you where I stood. If you can't respect that, then I don't know what else to say." I walked out, my heart pounding in my ears. My mom's sobs followed me down the steps, but I didn't look back. The cold night air hit my face, and for the first time in a long time, I felt clear. The lines had been drawn. I didn't cross theirs, and I wouldn't let them cross mine. That night, I sat in my car for a long time before driving home. My phone buzzed with texts from my parents, Sarah, even Lily. They'd probably even told her about this. I ignored them all. I wasn't ready to respond, to explain myself again, to justify my pain. I'd done that enough. When I finally got home, the emptiness of the apartment no longer felt suffocating. Instead, it felt like space. I could breathe in. I was tired of holding on to relationships that hurt me, of trying to fit pieces together that no longer matched. I spent the next few days in quiet reflection. I knew I had burned bridges that couldn't be rebuilt, but there was also a strange sense of freedom in it. I wasn't carrying the weight of others' expectations anymore. I wasn't obligated to forgive someone who hadn't earned it. One evening, I decided to meet up with some friends. They'd been worried about me, and I figured it was time to step out of the shadows. We went to a small bar downtown, the kind of place where the music was low and the conversation could flow. As I sipped my drink and listened to their laughter, I realized how much I had isolated myself. The world hadn't ended because my engagement did. Life kept moving, and so could I. Later that night, as we were leaving, my friend Sam clapped me on the shoulder. "You did the right thing, man," he said. "It takes guts to stand up for yourself." I nodded, a small smile forming for the first time. I believed it. Standing my ground had cost me, but losing myself would have cost more. The next morning, I went for a walk along the beach. The waves lapped gently at the shore, and the morning sun reflected off the water in shimmering golden hues. I took a deep breath, letting the salty sea air fill my lungs. There was still hurt, still loss, but there was also hope. I was finally free to build a life where my boundaries were respected, where I didn't have to compromise my peace for the sake of someone else's idea of family. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I was okay with that. One step at a time. I would figure it out. The days stretched into weeks, and life settled into a new rhythm. I wasn't the same person I'd been before the breakup, but I was starting to feel more grounded. There was a strange peace in the quiet, in the simplicity of focusing on myself. It felt like I was slowly rebuilding the foundations of my life. Not for anyone else, just for me. I spent more time with friends, people who accepted me for who I was. We explored hidden trails through the coastal cliffs, sat around bonfires on cool evenings, and shared stories that reminded me what real connection felt like. These friendships were honest, untainted by expectations or betrayal. They gave me the strength to keep moving forward. At work, things were steady. I threw myself into projects, taking on challenges that pushed me to grow. My boss, Denise, noticed the change in me. One day, she pulled me aside after a meeting. "You've been doing great, Brian," she said, a smile on her face. I can see the focus in you. Keep it up. I nodded, feeling a spark of pride. Her words reminded me that despite everything, I was still capable, still driven. My past hadn't broken me. It had forged me into something stronger. One weekend, I decided to clear out the apartment. It was time to let go of the things that tied me to what used to be. As I went through the drawers and closets, I found remnants of my relationship with Lily. A stray earring, an old movie ticket stub, a half-written grocery list in her handwriting. Each item carried a memory, a flicker of what we had. But instead of drowning in nostalgia, I let each one go. I placed them in a box, sealed it, and set it aside. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing to move forward without the weight of what could have been. The apartment felt different, cleaner, lighter. It was finally my space. I rearranged the furniture, added a few plants, and hung up new artwork. These small changes made a big difference. The space felt like a reflection of who I was now, not who I used to be. One evening, as I cooked dinner, a new hobby I was slowly getting better at, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. "We miss you. Please talk to us when you're ready." I stared at the message for a long time. The hurt from the dinner ambush still lingered, but I also knew my parents weren't bad people. They just didn't understand the depth of my pain, the boundaries I needed to protect myself. I didn't reply right away. I needed more time, and that was okay. Healing didn't have to be rushed. A few weeks later, I was at a rooftop party in downtown Austin when I met someone new. Her name was Emily. She had an easy smile and a way of making conversation feel effortless. We talked about everything, from favorite books to road trips to the best barbecue spots in Texas. She didn't pry about my past or ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. She just enjoyed the moment with me. That was refreshing. I didn't need to explain myself or defend my boundaries. I could just be. As the sunset turned the sky shades of orange and purple, Rachel turned to me and smiled. "Feel like grabbing a milkshake?" she asked. I chuckled. "Sure, as long as I don't have to sing karaoke." She laughed, and in that moment, I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't the rush of falling in love. It was the quiet comfort of knowing that maybe, just maybe, new beginnings were possible. That night, as I walked back into my apartment, I realized something. I wasn't over everything that had happened. The scars from Sarah's betrayal and Lily's broken trust were still there. But those scars didn't define me. They were just part of my story. I was stronger now, more aware of what I needed and deserved. I knew that I couldn't control other people's actions, but I could control how I responded to them. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with my choices. I stood by the window, gazing out at the Austin skyline. The world was still moving, and so was I. The path ahead was uncertain, but I wasn't afraid. I had boundaries, self-respect, and a clearer sense of who I was. Sometimes standing your ground means losing people you love, but in the end, it also means finding yourself. And that's a trade I was finally willing to make.